Welcome to the Real Lost Boss podcast.
Hello, welcome to episode 42 of the Real Lost Boss podcast. And in this one, we are doing what really causes you to overeat. Okay. To lose weight, we have to consume less calories than we burn. There is a massive misconception that what we eat has a direct relevance to what our weight does. And we have this, again, it's a misconception that certain foods make us fat and certain foods make us thin. That just isn't the case. What makes us fat is over-consuming calories over a consistent period of time. What makes us thin is under-consuming calories over a consistent period of time. So if you consume less calories than you burn over a consistent period of time, irrelevant of what you eat, whether it be McDonald's or lettuce, or McDonald's with lettuce included, you will consistently lose body fat. Likewise, if you consistently consume more calories than you burn, and whether that be McDonald's or lettuce, yes, it's a lot harder to overconsume lettuce than it is to overconsume double cheeseburgers. But if you are able to, which would be a feat, I'll give you if you manage to do that. But yeah, if you are able to consume more calories than you burn by just consuming lettuce, guess what? You will get fat. Now that might seem like illogical or, just isn't truthful, but it is the truth. Like I say, the amount of lettuce you'd actually have to consume to put yourself into a calorie surplus would be a ridiculous amount. And the chances of anyone actually being able to do that is damn near impossible, but that is how it works. What our calories are made up of, so the food we eat on a day-to-day basis, is what determines our health. So if you consume 2,000 calories a day on average, and that puts you into a calorie deficit, and those 2,000 calories is just from eating 4.5 double cheeseburgers from McDonald's a day, you'll consistently lose weight, but you are not going to be very healthy. I say that the most chronic health condition in the world is obesity. So someone that is 25 stone, if they can get down to 15 stone by just eating double cheeseburgers, they're not going to be the healthiest they could be, but they will be a lot healthier than being 25 stone. What our calories are made up of is what determines our overall health. And of course, that should be, if I'm being totally honest with you, that should be the main reason why we are on a weight loss journey, is to get healthier. Unfortunately, a lot of people's main reason to be on a weight loss journey is simply to fit into smaller clothes or, looks, aesthetics, as it were. And I'm not saying that isn't important, but maybe that's for a different podcast. I might have already covered it in a previous podcast. But anyway, this one is about why you are overeating. So I've done that little bit of a spiel at the beginning is because I want you to understand why it's important that you learn to control your calories. Now, you might think what I'm going to talk about now is what we would call maybe anecdotal. So it was relevant for me. And just because something is relevant for one person doesn't mean it's relevant for everyone. And you get this all the time on social media. You'll get people saying, I've done a post recently that said, eating bread's absolutely fine, for example. And then someone will post, well, I've not eaten bread for 2 months and I've lost 2 stone. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's because not eating bread means you've eaten less calories. That's probably put you, or has put you, into a calorie deficit and you've lost weight. But just because you've lost 2 stone by not eating bread does not mean everyone else will reduce their calories enough to lose 2 stone. Does that kind of make sense? Likewise, I think a more recent post I did about fat, and healthy fats are monounsaturated, saturated, polyunsaturated. Unhealthy fats are saturated and trans fats. And again, someone commented on a post that I did about that, saying my granddad's 83 and, you know, he's eaten saturated fat all his life and he's as fit as a fiddle and all this, that and the other. And I'm like, yeah, there's always going to be an anomaly. There's always going to be, you know, someone that, I'm positive I read somewhere that the oldest woman in the world smoked 20 cigarettes a day until she died at 120, or had at least a few cigarettes a day until she died at 120. I'm positive it was a French lady that springs to mind. But that doesn't mean that everyone's, you know, plan to live long and make it to be 120, you should smoke cigarettes every day. Just doesn't make sense, does it? Okay, just because it works for one doesn't mean it works for another. But what we can do is we can look at something, and if it seems to work for a majority of people or a good amount of people, we can assume that it will work for most people. And that's kind of how research works. You know, if you test something out on 1,000 people and it works for 800 people, then there's a very good chance that, you know, it's going to work for a lot more people than it won't work for. And that's why things get put forward, you know. So why I'm saying this is I'm going to talk a bit about my own journey and how I sorted out my own overeating issues, because obviously I was 37 stone a few years ago. To get to being 37 stone, you've got an issue with overeating, and it is something I've managed to conquer. And I managed to conquer it by doing something that I had never done before, which I'll go into shortly. And I could sit here now and say it worked for me, so it has to work for you. And you might go, well, you've just said, Neil, just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. True. But since May 2021, I have been an online weight loss coach. And from being an online weight loss coach, it means I've worked now with a couple of thousand people plus, helping them lose weight. And whether those people have been on my one-to-one plan, to which I have had well over 700 people on my one-to-one Boss Your Weight Loss plan. If you would like to join my one-to-one Boss Your Weight Loss plan, please read the description of this podcast and all the details are in there, or head over to my website, www.thereallossboss.net. Yes, I've had about 700. I've actually just signed up my 761st client today as I'm recording this episode. But clients that have worked with me for more than a couple of months, over 700 one-to-one. I also then have my community subscription as well. And I've probably had in the last 2-3 years over 1,000 people in and out of the community. All those people, whether they're on my one-to-one plan or join the community, get taught my philosophies of weight loss. From my own experience, things that worked for me, I've put into a plan and I've coached other people to follow that plan. And the majority of people that come onto my plan that follow what they need to follow lose a lot of body fat and have successful weight loss journeys. So that's why, you know, I'm confident what I'm going to tell you now will work for you. Okay, overeating. I've actually done a live recently within my community where I've talked about the differences between binge eating and overeating. I'm not going to go into that in this podcast, but what is overeating? So overeating is basically consuming more calories than you should be doing. And there might be a few reasons why you consume more calories than you should be doing. You might consume more calories than you should be doing because of poor portion control. You might be consuming more calories than you should be because of a lack of movement. You don't burn many calories, therefore it's very easy to overconsume calories. You might overconsume calories. I didn't really want to go into this straight away, actually. I was trying to think of another reason, but This is the main reason why. Yeah, I can't think of another reason. There is one. There's one on the tip of my tongue somewhere, tucked away in the vast caves of my brain. But anyway, I'll tell you why most people overeat. And this was certainly the case for me, and it has certainly been the case for the majority of my clients. And when we've tapped into this, it has certainly helped a lot of people control their eating. And I'm sure some of you haven't thought of it. And like I say, those things I've just said there, you might think, oh, I overeat because I eat the wrong. That was it. That was the other one. So you think you overeat because of poor portion control. You feel you overeat calories because you eat the wrong things. And likewise, you've probably not thought about you overeat calories because you don't move enough. But one of the big reasons is mentality. It's your head. It's your head that triggers overeating. Okay, we're going to rewind. I'm going to talk about food addiction. It's a real thing. And for me personally, I think it's one of the worst addictions there is. Because food addiction is the only addiction that I can personally think of that you can't quit. So let's think of other big addictions that people suffer with. Alcoholism, drugs, gambling, smoking. Any more? There's probably a few more as well, but those are the big ones for me. Alcohol, drugs, gambling, and smoking. Those are 4 really big, common addictions. And you can live without all those things. You can go cold turkey with alcohol. You can go cold turkey with drugs. You can go cold turkey. I don't mean before anyone jumps on the bandwagon, I know there are certain things where you need to ease yourself off. But what I mean is, once you've eased yourself off alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, you don't need them in your life. You can shut them out. A lot easier said than done. I totally get that. But you can shut them out. One thing you can't quit is food. We have to eat to survive. Now, the way a lot of people try to control their eating or improve the amount of calories they are eating, and a lot of people do this because we have this mentality, certain foods make us fat, certain foods make us thin. So what a lot of people try to do is cut out or quit the certain foods that make us fat. And foods that spring to mind with that is things like takeaways, fast food, chocolate, crisps, stuff like that. How many of you listening stroke watching this now have gone to extremes on your weight loss journey? Because it's what I always used to do when I tried to lose weight. I've gone, I'm never eating a takeaway ever again. I'm never eating chocolate ever again. I'm never eating crisps or biscuits ever again. The reality is you're going to eat those things again. Even if you don't want to, for whatever reason, you're going to eat them again because you can't quit food. And you might be like, well, yeah, but I can quit eating crisps. It doesn't mean that I have to quit eating lettuce, right? But the issue with that is we enjoy eating food. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that. And I think we've been demonized a lot, certainly recently on social media, that we should eat in a certain way. A lot of people promoting the carnivore diet, just eat steak and eggs. I'm not a robot. I don't want to eat like that. And for the rights or wrongs of it, I enjoy a takeaway. I don't just enjoy a takeaway because of how it tastes. I enjoy the feeling of a takeaway. I love it on a Saturday night when, you shut the curtains and you get all cozy and you put a film on and then you get a pizza in or something like that. That's a nice feeling. It's not just the fact that I enjoy eating the pizza. I like the whole vibe around it. And I don't want to lose that. I enjoy it. Likewise, I enjoy crisps. I enjoy chocolate. And we can consume anything we want in moderation. And it won't be detrimental to our health and it won't be detrimental to our weight loss journey. And yes, you can try and quit certain foods. That's absolutely fine. But the issue with trying to quit certain foods is, and again, this might be for the rights or wrongs of it, there isn't enough outside pressure to quit chocolate, crisps, cake, takeaways. And that's a big factor. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it is. And what I mean by that is, if you go to someone's birthday party, okay, so a friend of yours is having a party, they've hired out the local village hall or a room in a pub or something like that, and you turn up and everyone's having a good time, right? And you sit down and they're passing around the bubbly because they're going to do a toast to this person whose birthday it is. And you go, I'm all right, thanks. And the person, no, have one. We're doing a toast to, Dave or Sarah, right? We're doing a toast, so you need one. And you go, no, I'm all right, thank you. And then they go, can you have one, please? And you go, look, I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I don't want one. Is that all right? That person trying to force a drink onto you, and you might have said before, I'm all right, thanks, I'm not drinking tonight. And they might be like, no, just have one, just have a sip, it's a toast, And like I say, as soon as you say, I'm a recovering alcoholic, that person will go, I'm so sorry, I didn't realise. I'll get you lemonade or an orange juice. Just let me hand these out. That would be the general response, wouldn't it? If that same person's walking around after you've sung happy birthday and they've sliced up the cake and they're giving you a piece of cake and it's chocolate cake and you're, I'm all right, thank you. And you're like, no, I'm watching what I eat. Well, we're all watching what we eat, but go on, have it. It's Sally's birthday, have a piece of cake. Come on, right? And you're like, no. Actually, I'm a recovering chocoholic. They'd literally look at you. And again, for the rights or wrongs of it, I'm not saying this is their right reaction. They'd be like, you're a recovering, it's a bit of chocolate cake, all right? You don't need to eat the whole cake. Just have a little bit. It's Sally's birthday. They wouldn't have that same reaction. And you might think that shouldn't matter, but it does, because that little outside pressure on, that is there for quitting alcohol, quitting drugs. You tell anyone you're an ex-drug addict or an ex-alcoholic, they might judge you for it, which is wrong, obviously, but they will be very careful with what they say. You tell someone that you're an ex-food addict, doesn't like that, they'd laugh you off the park. And that's not fair. I'm not saying it is, and it's wrong of them to judge like that, but that's kind of the way it is. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason why we can't quit foods, but it is a big factor. And another factor is, you're going to live with people that, again, are probably going to enable you in some way for the rights or wrongs of it. And what I mean by enabling is, right, I'm not eating a takeaway ever again, and you're the only person in your household losing weight. Now, this is wrong on the other people's part, but it's a scenario that will crop up more times than not. So you're on a weight loss journey, the only person in your house on a weight loss journey. You've said to yourself, I'm not eating takeaways ever again. First week on your weight loss journey, it's Friday night, and your partner or your kid, we want a takeaway. And you're like, I'm not having one. I've got my prep food in the fridge. I'm going to eat that for my tea. Well, I don't want prep food for my tea. It's fine. You don't have to have prep food for your tea, but that's what I'm going to have because I'm on a weight loss journey. If you want to have a takeaway, order one, have it, and I'll eat my prep food. Well, yeah, but I'm not having a takeaway if you don't have a takeaway. Now, that might be their own guilt of eating coming in because they know they shouldn't be having a takeaway. They might have a weight loss journey themselves, but, it justifies it to them. If the other person in the household that's also got a weight loss journey is eating takeaway, it makes me feel better about me eating a takeaway. There's lots of, again, another podcast about enabling. I need to write all these down. And you know what? Just to keep the peace, we'll break. We'll break for a couple of reasons. One, like I've said, just to keep the peace, but we'll also break because we're food addicts and they're enabling you. And, a lot of the time when we're trying to quit a food addiction, especially or trying to change our eating habits, we can have the breaking strain of a soggy Kit Kat, unfortunately, and we need support around us. And unfortunately, again, around food, we don't get that support. And the main reason why I don't mean we don't always get that support. I'm not trying to tar everyone with the same brush here, but it is quite a common scenario. And the main reason for that is obesity does not affect people close to you directly severely. Say that again, Neil. I was just running random words off then. What I mean by that is, if you're an alcoholic, right, you are going to massively affect people close to you, people that you live with, right? It is not nice living with a drunk, someone that might get aggressive through it, someone that's falling over all the time, smells of alcohol all the time. It's not good, right? Likewise, same with drug addicts, same with gambling. I've seen loads of programs over the years. I've suffered with several addictions throughout my life. So when programs come on about addiction, I don't mean I enjoy them. That sounds a bit sadistic. What I mean is I find them really interesting because I find them very relatable. And I remember watching the one with Paul Merson. Professional footballer earning thousands of pounds a week and literally went bust, lost his house, gambled the roof over his kid's head, right? And that's the addiction taking over. That's how damning gambling can be. Again, for the rights or wrongs of it, I always say this for the rights or I'm not trying to trigger people when I say this, but, me being 37 stone when I lived with my mum and dad, it probably wasn't nice for them to see me being 37 stone and struggling the way I was, but I didn't directly impact their lives massively in any way. And likewise, if you're currently, morbidly obese and you're living with someone, I'm not saying you're not holding their life back a little bit because they might want to go on holiday with you and you struggle to do that, or they might want to go for nice walks and you might struggle to do that, but it's not a massive issue, So again, that's another reason why it's harder to quit food. Also, last one I'm going to touch on, a lot of things we quit, takeaways, chocolate, biscuits, they're always going to crop up. There's always going to be things that remind you of them, right? There's always going to be times where you go to a wedding or a christening or a birthday party and, you go to a wedding, it's a set, it's standard in at a wedding. You get flipping soup to start, roast beef in some variety, and, chocolate strawberry cheesecake or chocolate gatto or something like that. And don't get me wrong, you might go, well, I'm not eating that dessert because I've quit chocolate. The honest truth is, again, maybe a little bit of peer pressure or the fact that you're at an event and you've had a few drinks and you lose a bit of self-control around eating, you eat that chocolate. Therefore, you failed your addiction. You failed quitting your not quitting your addiction, but you failed your stance on, I'm never eating chocolate ever again. There's also lots of things that remind us of chocolate, right? There's also lots of things that remind us of crisps. There's also lots of things that remind us of a takeaway. So again, you might be sat listening, watching this now going, no, Neil, these are all irrelevant things. These are, you've just got to be strong and you've just got to say, no, no, no. It's not that easy. I wish it was. And why I'm talking about this is because I've gone through these extremes throughout my life. Pretty much every single diet I've gone on, I've quit food that makes me fat. That's how I felt. Food doesn't make you fat. I know that now because I'm a lot more educated around it. But that is, the stance I've taken, and I've quit food that makes me fat. So anything that makes me fat, I've not consumed it, and, that's my, interpretation. So I think every diet I went on, other than the one I started in 2014, I'm not eating a takeaway, I'm not eating crisps, I'm not eating chocolate. All that did was ramp up the cravings. And yeah, at some point in time, you give in. And when you give in, and again, you might be sat there going, well, you shouldn't give in. I'm sorry, that's just not the reality, because food is pretty much impossible to quit. It really, really is. And you give in, and then you feel like you're letting yourself down, you feel like a failure, and then that just spirals. And next thing, you're back into old habits. A lot of people, I'm talking about food as an addiction, and food is an addiction, but I think there are different addictions on different levels. And there's actually no evidence anywhere that shows that foods have any major addictive properties. So we know nicotine is addictive. We know that the body craves it. So when we start smoking and we take nicotine into our body, the body craves it. And the body, it like yearns for it. And that is the body talking, smoke, smoke, smoke. And it's very hard to fight that craving. Now, I've talked already about food and you get sweet cravings and this, that, and the other. We get cravings from food for different reasons because, like I say, there isn't any real evidence out there. There's a couple of studies, but there's no hardcore results that have come in and gone, sugar is addictive, yet we think it is. The only food source that has actually been shown to have any slight addictive properties is actually fat. And that makes sense. Yeah. People that have diets high in saturated fat tend to consume a lot of calories. Now, that can be for a couple of reasons. One, because saturated fat is very high in calories anyway, but fat has been shown in certain studies. Again, there's nothing conclusive, there's nothing hardcore concrete evidence, which is why I'm not going to state any studies around it, but just little bits and pieces that I've read. Fat is addictive. And that does make sense. So a lot of you watching stroke listening to this podcast now will think you're addicted to chocolate. And you'll think you're addicted to chocolate because of the sugar content. A lot of things that people think they're addicted to is because of the fat content, or that would be more of a contributing factor to feeling addicted to something than sugar. If you take a chocolate bar, for instance, there are more calories in a chocolate bar from fat than there is from sugar. Yet you think you're addicted to chocolate because of sugar. The real reason that you crave chocolate is because of fat. And that's why people crave crisps and biscuits, high fat content, cake, high fat content, crisps, high fat content, most takeaways, pizza, fish and chips, kebabs, Indian, Chinese, high fat content. That is what's most addictive about food. But like I've said already, there's no concrete evidence to say, and when I say there's no concrete evidence that it has any sort of addictive properties, there's no concrete evidence to show that people have withdrawals. So you might eat a lot of chocolate and then you quit. There's actually this, when you quit smoking, there is evidence to show that nicotine talks to the body and says, I want, or your body talks to your head and goes, I want nicotine, I want nicotine, I want nicotine, I want nicotine. There is actually no concrete evidence to say that about food, certainly sugar and fat, but there are some studies out there, and the studies show that fat would be the one if that was the case. But like I've already said, there are different levels of addiction. There really, really are. And addiction can just be habit. Like you've just got the habit of going to somewhere all the time. And when you say to yourself, I'm not going to go there, I used to have a habit, an addiction of going to the pub. Right. And, when I didn't go to the pub, my brain was talking to me going, I want to go to the pub. I want to go to the pub. I want to go to the pub. So there's lots of different levels of addiction. But again, does anything happen major to my body if I don't go to the pub? No. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Okay. So a lot of people feel they're addicted to certain foods, and that's why they go into this, I'm never eating this ever again mentality. When I started my weight loss journey in 2014, I went into it saying, I'm going to do this totally different than I've ever done weight loss before. So everything I've done in the past, I didn't do it. Or I did the opposite. Or I met myself halfway. So as I've already said in this podcast, every single diet I went on pre-2014, I'm never eating takeaways ever again. When I started my weight loss journey in 2014, I had 2 takeaways a week most weeks. Now you might be like, that's quite a lot, Neil. It might be, but I probably went down from what I class as a takeaway is when I'm eating something that I've not cooked myself, right? So that might be just going to a butty van at the side of the road. I class that as a takeaway. Getting a Subway, getting a Greggs, getting a McDonald's, KFC, going for a Chinese, an Indian, a pizza, a kebab, anything like that. I class it all as takeaways, right? And I probably had 10 takeaways a week. You might be like, what? And I don't mean I had 10 Chineses a week, but, most days, I would say a lot for my lunch. I'd go out and about and I'd grab fish and chips for my lunch, or I'd grab a McDonald's or a Subway. Actual takeaways in the house, I had Chinese once a week, probably again had fish and chips again. Probably grabbed a pizza from somewhere once a week. Probably had a McDonald's breakfast once a week. Again, I class that as a takeaway. So I went down from probably 10 a week to 2. And not only did I go from 10 a week to 2, I went from spending 25 quid on Chinese just for me. And I'm talking 10, 12 years ago. 25 quid 10, 12 years ago got you a lot of Chinese food. It get you a fair bit now. But 10, 12 years ago, it got you a hell of a lot of Chinese food. Likewise, chippy, right? Fish, chips, peas, jumbo sausage, barm cake, you know. And if I was feeling extremely peckish, I might chuck a steak pudding in there as well. When I started my weight loss journey, I had chippy every week. It was a family tradition. And I used to get a large, lightly battered fish and peas. That was a Wednesday night. I used to get a Chinese every Sunday night. Again, it was kind of a bit of a family tradition. It's kind of what we did. And I just used to get a main course and rice. So instead of spending 25 quid at the Chinese, I spent 6. Because I used to get like Szechuan beef and egg fried rice. And it was 6 quid. All right. Chippy, you know, I just used to get a large, lightly battered fish and peas. Doing that twice a week helped me control my eating, right? It really, really did. Not going to these extremes. Also, I allowed myself 2 bags of crisps a week, good size, like grab bag size, 50-gram bags of crisps a week, and 2 chocolate bars a week, or 2 chocolate bars with biscuit in. I'm a biscuit fiend. Twix, yes. Picnic, yes. Anything with crunch or biscuit in, absolutely love it. And again, I feel that allowed me to control my eating. Now, I know this podcast, I know I've gotten off on a load of different tangents, like I normally do. And I know this podcast is the real reason why you're overeating. But I just wanted to talk about, different mentalities around food. Because I think a lot of people think they overeat because they're addicted to sugar. A lot of people think they overeat because of what they're eating. And I'm kind of going into, I suppose, like I say, a little bit off track when I'm talking about how I control my food. But it worked for me. And I coach my clients the same way now. I give them a bit of freedom with their eating. I teach them how to, use their calories in a way that allows them a couple of treats a week, so on and so forth. And for the majority of my clients, it's a great way. Anyway, let's get back on track. The real reason why you're overeating, it's not down to food addiction. It's not down to the types of food you're eating. The real reason why I used to, yes, I put these little things into place, like allow myself a little bit of a takeaway, a little bit of Christian chocolate, and that helped me control my eating. But I think that would have only lasted for so long. Right? Likewise, I really had to control my alcohol intake when I started my weight loss journey. And I went from going on weekend benders to just going to the pub on a Friday night and having 3 or 4 pints. Again, allowing myself a little bit kept the wolves at bay in terms of over craving something. And I have seen a lot of people saying, if you want to stop overeating, you need to cut out your triggers. This is where I'm getting to. And a lot of people think their triggers is sugar. A lot of people think their triggers is, mainly sugar really, or their trigger is having a takeaway in the first place. And they feel that the option is then to cut out my triggers is to stop eating sugar or to stop eating a takeaway. Likewise, I did an issue with alcohol, and obviously that was an issue in terms of my health, but also an issue with calories because alcohol is quite calorific. And I'm not saying I was a full-blown alcoholic, and if you have a big issue with alcoholism, yes, you might need to totally quit drinking alcohol. I didn't. Allow myself a little bit allowed me to keep, like I say, the wolves at the door. But overall, what stopped me overeating, all these little tips and tricks helped, but the big thing, the main thing that stopped me overeating, and I guarantee if you sort this out, it will also stop you overeating. My biggest trigger for overeating, it wasn't sugar, it wasn't takeaways, biscuits, crisps. It was emotion. And this is not what I hear a lot of people talk about. Emotional eating. That's what triggers overeating. A lot of people say to me, how can you just have a Freddo and that satisfy your need for chocolate? Because that's all I need. Because I've got a bit of a sweet craving. I eat something a bit sweet, that numbs my craving because I've got control over my emotions. Now, if I was still a massive emotional eater, that little bit of chocolate that numbs the negative emotion in my head, a Freddo's only going to numb negative emotion for a very short period of time. Therefore, I'm going to want more chocolate to numb more negative emotion. Emotional eating is using food as a distraction, as a comfort blanket, as well, there's lots of different, not lots of different reasons, but or lots of different terminologies. But basically, we use food to take us away from reality. And I don't think a lot of people understand what negative emotion is. Negative emotion is not just anger or sadness or depression and anxiety. Negative emotion is tiredness. Negative emotion's hunger. Any emotion you're feeling that you don't want to feel is a negative emotion. And if you use food as a coping mechanism, if these emotions are running wild in your body, you're going to constantly overeat. That is your trigger for overeating. So if you're constantly stressed, constantly tired, constantly angry, constantly jealous, constantly feeling guilty, constantly sad, constantly lonely, right? Constantly nervous, constantly in fear, right? If you've got these negative emotions always ringing around in your body, you are always going to look for your coping mechanism, your distraction to take them away for even the shortest period of time because it allows you to feel normal for that short period of time. Pre 2014, I was constantly in fear for my health. I was constantly jealous because I saw the way, certainly from social media, the way other people I knew were living their lives, and I wanted to live that life. I'm not saying everyone's life is perfect, but I was existing, not living. You know, you didn't realize pre-social media what other people did. Now you know everything that people do. You know where people are going on holiday. You know what their hotel room looks like. You know what their car's like. You know what they eat on a day-to-day basis. And I couldn't do any of that because of my obesity. So I was constantly jealous. I was constantly angry. I was angry at I was angry at people. I was angry at life. I was angry at myself. I was angry at my parents. I was constantly lonely. You know, I'd not been in a relationship since 2006. And as time goes on, that gets hard. So I'd been single for 8 years when I started my weight loss journey. And like I say, that's a tough negative emotion. When you see friends going out on date nights on social media again and this, that, and the other, and literally the only thing you've got to keep you company is your four walls of your prison that you have to live in because you're 37 stone, that is a sad life to lead. And the only comfort I ever had in life was food. Now, it felt like a comfort at the time, but it wasn't a comfort. It was something that kept me trapped in my prison. When I started my weight loss journey, I was going through a very rough time. You know, I have spoke about this before. I have no idea if I spoke about it on a podcast before, but I came to the decision at Christmas 2013 that I didn't want to be here anymore. And I put things into place to make sure I wasn't here anymore. And it failed. It didn't happen. It didn't work. I tried. For the life of me, I don't know why it didn't work. I'm flipping glad it did now, but it didn't. I woke up and I was like, and I didn't feel great, but I did wake up. And I didn't think I would have done, but I did. Maybe because of my size, I didn't use enough of what I was trying to use, but I'm not going to go into any more detail of that. That gave me a reality check. That scared me again because it actually made me realise that I was glad when I did wake up. It made me realise that I needed to be here. Or I wanted to be here, sorry, not needed to be here. I wanted to be here. And that kind of gave me a kick up the bum because I sort of said to myself, I remember saying to myself, right, well, if that's not the option and you actually have now convinced yourself you want to be here, then you need to sort your shizzle out, Neil, right? You need to stop living this lifestyle. And that was my first kick up the bum to sort things out. And, from that, and maybe I did some of this subconsciously, but the way I lived my life, I didn't like it. And I changed it. I changed the jobs that I was doing. I requalified and started doing a job that I loved. I hated the job that I did previous to my weight loss journey, and I never realized how detrimental it was to my mental health. And changing that job, again, improved my life. As I'm feeling happier and healthier and more content with life, the negative emotion that whirled around for years and years in my head, it started to disappear. It'll never go away permanently, but it started to disappear. I used to go and get absolutely smashed every weekend. And deep down, I hated it. I hated the feeling. I hated the fact I was wasting my life. I hated the money I was spending. I hated being hungover. I hated the come downs. That caused binge eating as well to kind of get me through the come downs. And I quit drinking. Now, I thought my life revolved around the pub, and if I didn't go to the pub all weekend, I wouldn't have a life. How wrong I was. I traded the pub for the gym. Now, that might sound weird, right? And what I mean by that is, and I don't mean, Friday nights instead of going and getting smashed, but some nights I did. Some days I did. And rather than spending 15 hours a week in a pub, I started spending 5 or 6 hours a week in a gym. And it was a much healthier environment to be in. And I still used to go out, like I've already said, and have 3 or 4 pints on a Friday night. But I used to go home after 4 pints on a Friday night because I go to the gym on a Saturday morning. And I felt good about myself. It made me feel good about myself. Again, taking another level of negativity out of my lifestyle. And then I had a lot of issues in my head. I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of regrets around. My dad passed away in 2013. I might have touched on this in a different podcast. You might not have watched or listened to that podcast, but I had a very tough relationship with my dad. Felt very rejected by him. He didn't show much love. My dad was adopted, and he wasn't shown much love by his by his adopted parents, and he felt massively rejected by his biological parents because he was put up for adoption. And because of that, he struggled. My dad was bipolar type 2, and he struggled seriously with manic depressive states. And all I wanted was to feel loved from my dad, and I never got it. And I'm not going to go into any more detail in this podcast. I might have talked about it in more detail in previous podcasts, but I had therapy, and I went to a therapist, and I talked about these issues that I was having and the feelings that I was feeling. And he made me realize it wasn't my fault. I blamed myself for 25 years, and this was the biggest trigger for my overeating, certainly as a kid. And he justified it. He made me justify it in my head. And, my dad had passed away at this point, but my dad got cancer, and he literally was diagnosed with cancer, and 13 weeks after diagnosis passed away. And, again, the guilt of not having this conversation with him. But again, I had some therapy, and the therapist was fantastic, and he made me clear a lot of stuff up in my head. And again, that was another layer of negativity taken away. And then my weight loss, it took a while, but a lot of people fixate on the end goal of weight loss. They literally think they're only successful when they get to the not. My life just constantly changed. From going from 37 stone to 34, 35 stone, my life changed. Going from 34 to 31 stone, my life changed. And as I lost weight, I got more confident. I moved around more. My life changed. I could go on holidays, things that I've been very envious of. I could do things. I could go, when friends were, oh, well, let's not go to the pub on Saturday afternoon. Let's go for a walk instead. Very common January, February, because everyone's doing dry Jan. And I couldn't do that. January 2015, I could do that because, I was 12 months into my weight loss journey, and I was fitter and healthier in 12 months than a lot of my friends were. I was a lot heavier than them still, but, I was training in the gym. I was moving a lot more. I didn't wake up in fear every morning. I used to go to bed scared that I wouldn't wake up the next day. That went. I used to get up in the morning and wonder if I'd be able to get out of bed or not. That disappeared. So what I'm trying to say is, over the space of, and I'm still working on it now, but I noticed massively over the space of 18 months, I'd say, a lot of the negative emotion that I felt in my body, in my head, sorry, that triggered massive bouts of overeating, emotional eating, went. Because I didn't need to feel like that anymore because of the way I was now living my lifestyle. Alongside that, I was putting things into my lifestyle that makes you cope better with situations. Like I say, regular exercise, more healthier diet. I was always someone that used to cower away from conflict. I don't do that anymore. I'm not a conflictive. That's not even a word. Is it? I don't know. I'm not someone that, I'm not argumentative. I'm not very, brash or anything like that. I'm very laid back. I'm very sedate. But in the past, if someone just texts me a certain way, I'd overthink it and go, oh, they're not happy with me or something like that. Now, if I get a text in a certain way, which doesn't happen very often, but you're right, something up. Yeah, I face it straight away. If I feel that someone's not being right with me, I'll ask him, say, everything all right? I heard from you for ages. Oh yeah, I've just been there. And I know it might sound daft, and some of this stuff might sound really insignificant to you guys, but to me personally, it made a massive difference. And yeah, I conquered my overeating through curing my mental health and basically having a lot more positive emotion in my life than negative emotion. You can do all the things in the world. You can quit chocolate. You can quit takeaways, right? You can say, I'm never eating this ever again. You can use any method you want to use. Ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting. You can come on my plan, which is the most healthiest, sustainable weight loss plan in the world. Every weight loss success story has one common trend, and that is the person that's lost their weight for whatever reason has managed to permanently control their eating, has managed to go from overeating to being able to put themselves into a calorie deficit to lose their weight, and then hopefully once they've hit their goal, they then go into a calorie maintenance to maintain their losses. And if I talk to 100 successful weight loss people that have had a successful weight loss journey, that have lost their weight and maintained it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, I guarantee there'll be one common trend, one common factor between them all. They will all have conquered their emotional eating. You can't eradicate it. It'll never go for good, but as long as positivity is the main emotion in your life and negativity only crops up every now and then, that is how you will conquer your overeating. That is how you will stop overeating for good. So yeah, if someone says to you to stop overeating, you need to banish your triggers that cause you to overeat. Stop looking at food. Start looking at your head, your mental health. What is running around in your brain that is making you eat more calories than you need to? There we go. That's it for another podcast. I hope that's not run on too long and you found a good few elements in there that can help you on your own weight loss journey. Yes, sort out those negative emotions. Start to do that, and that will definitely help you. Until next time, yes, it will help you. So make sure you are bossing your weight loss.